In the glittering heart of Hollywood, where fame meets fortune, a chance encounter on Christmas Eve would alter two lives forever. As temperatures dropped and tourists rushed home, movie star Keanu Reeves crossed paths with James Miller, a forgotten hero living in society's shadows. No cameras captured what happened next. A moment of genuine humanity that challenged everything we think we know about celebrities, sacrifice, and second chances. Before the streets of Hollywood became his home, James Miller carried a different weight on his shoulders. Growing up in Marion, Ohio, he was the town's golden boy, star quarterback, honor student, and natural leader who spent summers coaching Little League. His father, a Vietnam veteran, had raised him on stories of service, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds formed in combat. Those stories shaped James's understanding of duty and brotherhood long before he ever put on a uniform. September 11th changed everything. James watched the towers fall during his morning break at Marion High, where he'd been working as an assistant football coach. By sunset, he stood in the Marine recruiting office, his college coaching dreams temporarily set aside. Sarah, his high school sweetheart turned fiancée, supported his decision with quiet strength, promising to wait as military spouses had done for generations. 3 deployments followed. James rose quickly through the ranks, his natural leadership abilities earning him respect from both superiors and subordinates. In the chaos of Afghanistan, he found his true calling, keeping his men alive, making split-second decisions that balanced mission objectives against human lives. His unit's reputation for bringing everyone home made him a requested commander for high-risk operations. But war extracts its price in blood and memory. During his 3rd deployment, an IED turned a routine patrol into a nightmare. James dragged 2 wounded Marines to safety under heavy fire, but couldn't reach his radio operator in time. The explosion that took his friend also shattered James's right leg, ending his military career and beginning a battle with chronic pain that would shape his future. The physical recovery lasted 18 months. The psychological wounds ran deeper. Sarah tried to understand the man who returned. Someone who checked exits compulsively, who woke fighting invisible enemies, who couldn't handle the sound of fireworks or crying children. Their relationship crumbled slowly, like a sandcastle against rising tide. She finally left when she found him unconscious from mixing pain pills with alcohol, his demons winning a battle she couldn't help him fight. The VA prescribed medications that dulled both pain and purpose. Therapy sessions felt like interrogations, with civilian doctors who couldn't comprehend the weight of command decisions or the guilt of surviving when others didn't. When his prescriptions ran out, street dealers offered alternatives. The house his parents left him, the last anchor to his former life, was sold to feed an addiction that promised temporary escape from memories he couldn't face. Los Angeles wasn't a planned destination. James hopped freight trains west, seeking anonymity in a city where everyone was running from or toward something. Here, his military bearing gradually eroded under the necessities of survival. His combat boots were traded for warmer shoes, his medals pawned for food and necessity. Only his Marine Corps jacket remained, a shell of identity he couldn't bring himself to surrender. Living on the streets required a different kind of tactical thinking. James mapped safe sleeping spots, learned which shelters had the fewest restrictions, which church kitchens served the best meals. He found a loose community of other veterans, sharing information and watching each other's backs with the same vigilance they'd once applied to combat patrols. Some nights, they'd share stories of their service, brief moments of dignity rekindled in the telling of who they'd been before the world stopped making sense. The unusual Christmas Eve snow had thinned the usual Hollywood crowd to almost nothing when Keanu first noticed the figure in the doorway. Through the gentle snowfall, he could make out the military jacket, its patches faded but still bearing the distinct eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps. Something about the man's posture, straight back despite the cold, alert even in stillness, spoke of training that survived even the harshest circumstances. Keanu had parked his motorcycle intending to spend a quiet evening at home with scripts and solitude. But memories of his own father's struggles after Vietnam stirred something in him. He'd heard too many stories of veterans lost in civilian life, of warriors who survived combat only to fall in battles fought alone on home soil. The snow continued falling, each flake a reminder that some moments arrive unexpectedly, carrying the weight of destiny in their silence. His approach was careful, measured, the way one might near a wounded wolf. Not out of fear, but respect for an individual who'd clearly seen enough of life's harder edges to warrant caution. The veteran noticed his approach immediately, body tensing in that universal language of survival. Keanu stopped at a distance that offered both safety and dignity, his hands visible in a gesture any combat veteran would understand. "Whether something else tonight," Keanu offered, his voice carrying none of the polish from movie premieres or interviews. Just a simple observation between two humans sharing an unusual Los Angeles evening. The veteran, James, though Keanu wouldn't learn his name until later, responded with a slight nod, his eyes constantly scanning the street with ingrained vigilance. Keanu didn't rush to fill the silence that followed. He'd learned from his father that some conversations needed space to breathe, that trust built in quiet moments could prove stronger than any forged through immediate connection. They stood together, watching the snow transform Sunset Boulevard into something from another world entirely. A distant car backfired, making both men instinctively tense. That shared reaction sparked something, a recognition of common ground despite their vastly different circumstances. James's hand moved unconsciously to where a weapon might once have been, and Keanu noticed the motion carried the smooth efficiency of thousands of repetitions. "3rd Battalion?" Keanu asked, noting the barely visible unit insignia on James's jacket. The question was specific enough to show knowledge, casual enough to leave room for refusal. James's eyes shifted, reassessing the actor with newfound interest. "My father served," Keanu explained, pulling out an old challenge coin, the kind given for exceptional service. "Different branch, same war. Vietnam." The coin caught the streetlight, its worn surface telling stories of years carried close. James's hand moved to his pocket, drawing out a creased photograph that had survived countless nights on the streets. "5th Marines," he said, his voice rough from disuse but carrying undimmed pride. "Afghanistan. Then Iraq." They traded stories in the falling snow, Keanu sharing memories of his father's struggles to find peace after war, James offering glimpses of his own journey from decorated Marine to forgotten veteran. The conversation flowed naturally, free from the artificial boundaries of status or circumstance. They spoke of brotherhood, of loss, of the challenges in translating warrior strengths to civilian life. As night deepened and Christmas lights began twinkling through the snow, their talk turned to hope and possibility. Keanu mentioned programs he'd researched after his father's death, places where veterans helped veterans rebuild their lives. Not with empty promises or temporary fixes, but with understanding born from shared experience. He spoke of Danny Sullivan's recovery project, of success stories written by warriors who'd found their way back from similar edges. James listened with the careful attention of a man accustomed to evaluating tactical options, weighing each word against years of disappointed hopes and broken promises. But something in Keanu's quiet sincerity, his lack of judgment or pity, began to crack the armor built by years of survival. When Keanu offered a business card with Sullivan's number, it wasn't presented as charity but as one warrior passing tactical intelligence to another. The business card felt impossibly heavy in James's calloused hands. Sullivan's recovery project. He'd heard whispers about it on the streets, stories that seemed too good to be true. Veterans who'd been down as far as he had finding their way back, rebuilding lives from the wreckage of war and trauma. The program had earned a reputation among the homeless veteran community as something different, a place that understood the unique challenges faced by warriors trying to find their place in a civilian world. Keanu watched silently as James turned the card over, reading and rereading the simple text as if searching for hidden catches or conditions. The actor recognized the look. He'd seen it on his father's face decades ago, that mixture of desperate hope and bone-deep fear of disappointment. The snow had stopped falling, leaving Hollywood draped in a surreal white blanket that muffled the usual city sounds. "I knew a guy," James said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Made it through 3 tours in Fallujah. Lost him last winter, right here on these streets. Hypothermia, they said, but really it was the memories that killed him. The cold just finished the job." He paused, fighting against emotions long buried under layers of survival instinct. "What makes this Sullivan any different from all the other programs that promise to fix us?" Keanu shifted his weight, choosing his words carefully. "Sullivan doesn't promise to fix anyone. He understands that warriors don't need fixing, they need purpose. The program isn't about erasing what happened or pretending you can go back to who you were before. It's about using who you've become to build something new." The actor shared how his father had initially rejected help, believing that seeking assistance somehow diminished his service or strength. How that pride had nearly destroyed him until another veteran had reached out, offering not sympathy but understanding. "My father used to say that the hardest battle he ever fought wasn't in Vietnam. It was with himself, accepting that reaching for help took more courage than refusing it." James's fingers brushed against the worn photo in his pocket, that tangible link to who he'd been before the streets became home. He thought about the younger veterans he tried to guide toward services while refusing them himself, the hypocrisy of preaching hope while surrendering to despair. The medal he'd earned for saving his men in Afghanistan had long since been pawned, but the responsibility he felt toward his fellow warriors remained encoded in his DNA. A police siren wailed in the distance, making both men instinctively scan for threats, a shared reaction that highlighted their different yet parallel experiences with survival. Keanu noticed how James's posture shifted, combat training asserting itself even after years of civilian hardship. Those instincts, that training, they're still part of you, the actor observed. Maybe it's time to redirect them toward a new mission. The word struck a chord deep in James's military heart. How many times had he told his Marines that adaptation was the key to survival? That rigid thinking got men killed, while flexibility and tactical awareness kept them alive. He'd been applying his military training to street survival for years. Maybe it was time to apply it to something more. Sullivan's program isn't charity, Keanu continued, sensing the internal struggle behind James's silence. It's veterans helping veterans. Warriors supporting warriors. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust our brothers to have our six while we focus on the objective. He shared stories of other program graduates, men and women who transformed their combat experience into civilian strength, who now help guide others along the same path. James looked down the empty street, at the Christmas lights twinkling through melting snow. 4 years, he'd watched happiness pass by like scenes from someone else's life, separated from joy by an invisible wall of trauma and isolation. The weight of his past choices pressed against his chest, but alongside it, something else stirred, a ghost of the leader he'd once been, the Marine who never left a man behind. The hardest step is the first one, Keanu said softly, understanding written in every line of his face. But you don't have to take it alone. The actor's presence wasn't that of a celebrity offering handouts, but of one warrior standing watch while another gathered courage for battle. In that moment, on that snow-covered Hollywood street, ranks and status meant nothing. Only the universal understanding between those who'd faced their own demons and lived to tell the tale. The Veterans Recovery Project building stood 3 stories tall on Highland Avenue, its red brick exterior a stark contrast to the sleek glass and steel structures surrounding it. James spent 45 minutes that first January morning just staring at the entrance, his fingers running over the worn edges of Sullivan's card. Every instinct honed by years on the streets screamed at him to run, to retreat to the familiar shadows where expectations couldn't touch him. But the Marine in him, that core of steel that survival hadn't quite eroded, remembered what it meant to advance under fire. Danny Sullivan met him at the door personally, his handshake firm and knowing. The program director's own combat experience showed in the way he positioned himself, not blocking the exit, giving James clear sightlines to all entry points. No immediate paperwork, no probing questions about his past. Just 4 simple words that cracked something in James's carefully constructed armor. Welcome home, Marine. The first phase of recovery tested every ounce of strength James had left. Detox was a battlefield unlike any he'd faced before, his body waging war against years of self-medication. But this time, he wasn't fighting alone. Other veterans surrounded him, men and women who understood the language of his nightmares, who didn't flinch at his hypervigilance or judge the demons that woke him screaming at 3 a.m. They shared their own stories of rock bottom and resurrection, creating a tapestry of hope woven from shared experience. Keanu visited regularly, never with cameras or fanfare. He brought books about meditation and martial arts, sharing techniques that had helped him find balance in a chaotic industry. Their conversations ranged from motorcycle maintenance to military history, building a friendship based on mutual respect rather than celebrity status. The actor's presence became a bridge between James's isolated world and the possibility of something more, proof that genuine connections could survive the gap between past and present. February brought group therapy sessions that finally made sense. Led by combat veterans turned counselors, they approached PTSD not as a disorder to be cured but as a natural response to extraordinary circumstances. James learned to see his military experience not as a burden but as a foundation for rebuilding. His leadership skills, once thought useless in civilian life, found new purpose in helping newer program members navigate their own recovery journeys. The program's approach to physical recovery proved equally transformative. Physical therapists who understood military injuries worked with James to rebuild strength in his damaged leg. They didn't promise miracles, but they offered something more valuable: practical techniques for managing chronic pain without medication. Each small victory in the gym became a stepping stone toward larger goals, his body remembering the discipline of training even as it adapted to new limitations. March saw James tackling the mountain of paperwork that had seemed insurmountable on the streets. Sullivan's team included veteran advocates who knew every form, every regulation, every shortcut through the VA's bureaucratic maze. His service-connected disability rating was re-evaluated, opening doors to medical care and education benefits that had seemed forever out of reach. The simple act of having a secure address to receive mail marked a profound shift in his ability to engage with the system. Spring brought opportunities for job training. The program's partnerships with veteran-friendly employers offered paths to meaningful work that valued military experience. James discovered his leadership abilities translated well to project management, particularly in construction where attention to detail and safety awareness were premium skills. A local construction company hired several program graduates, appreciating their discipline and teamwork mentality. The hardest part came in reaching out to his past. With Sullivan's encouragement and Keanu's quiet support, James found the courage to contact old unit members. Many had faced similar struggles. Some had overcome them, others were still fighting their own battles. The photo he'd carried all those years became a starting point for healing conversations, for rebuilding connections that PTSD and addiction had severed. Each step forward brought its own challenges. Some days, the weight of change felt heavier than the burdens he'd carried on the streets. Old triggers still lurked in unexpected places, a car backfiring, a child's sudden cry, the particular quality of silence before dawn that reminded him of Kandahar. But now he had tools to cope, numbers to call, people who understood that healing wasn't a straight line but a series of battles won one day at a time. Summer arrived with a new milestone, moving into his own apartment. The program helped with the security deposit, but the rent came from his own earnings at the construction company. Each piece of furniture became a victory marker, each bill paid on time a testament to recovery. The walls slowly filled with new photos alongside the old. His therapy group, his construction crew, casual snapshots with Keanu at program events. Evidence of a life rebuilding, one decision at a time. The program's success brought unexpected opportunities. James found himself speaking to younger veterans, sharing his story not as a cautionary tale but as proof that rock bottom could become a foundation. His military experience with logistics and team leadership proved invaluable in helping the program expand its reach, creating systems to track and support more veterans in need. The skills that had once kept his unit alive in combat now served to keep hope alive in others fighting their own battles for survival. 1 year after that snowy Christmas Eve encounter, James stood at the podium in the Recovery Project's community center, his voice steady as he addressed a room full of veterans and community leaders. The construction company had just promoted him to site manager, recognizing his unique ability to blend military precision with civilian project management. His team, largely composed of program graduates, had the highest safety record and completion rate in the company's history. The walls of his office displayed more than just construction certificates and safety awards. There was a special commendation from the mayor's office for pioneering veteran employment initiatives, photos of completed projects that provided housing for homeless veterans, and most importantly, that worn photo of his unit from Afghanistan. Now it hung alongside new images, his construction crews celebrating project completions, group photos from program graduations, quiet moments with Keanu at volunteer events. Each image told a story of redemption, of purpose rediscovered. Keanu had remained true to his word, showing up regularly without cameras or publicity. Their friendship had deepened beyond that initial connection, built on shared understanding and mutual respect. They still talked about motorcycles and martial arts, but now these conversations happened over coffee in James's apartment or during planning sessions for program expansions. The actor had become a quiet but steady supporter of the Recovery Project, helping to expand its reach while carefully avoiding any publicity that might overshadow its mission. James's influence extended far beyond his own recovery. Drawing on his coaching background, he'd established a mentoring program pairing newly admitted veterans with program graduates. His military experience with logistics helped create streamlined systems for tracking resources and support services. The construction company's veteran hiring program, developed with his input, became a model for other businesses in the area, proving that military skills could translate powerfully into civilian success. Every evening, James made a point of walking past the doorway where Keanu had found him. He knew which corners harbored veterans still struggling, which alleys held those not yet ready to accept help. He carried resource cards and water bottles, but more importantly, he carried hope, living proof that change was possible. Some nights, he'd sit and listen to their stories, recognizing his own past fears and their hesitation to trust, to try again. His relationship with the VA system transformed from adversarial to collaborative. Working with Sullivan, James helped create a streamlined process for veterans accessing benefits, using his own experience to identify and address common roadblocks. The program's success rate in securing proper disability ratings and healthcare access drew attention from VA administrators looking to improve their services. Personal healing brought unexpected reconnections. A cousin searching social media found James's name in a local business article about veteran employment. This led to reunions with extended family, rebuilding bridges he thought permanently burned. Holiday dinners, once spent in solitude, now filled with the warmth of recovered relationships and new friendships forged in recovery. The construction company's annual Christmas party became a celebration of second chances. James stood proudly with his crew as they received recognition for completing the city's largest veteran housing project. The buildings they created would offer affordable homes specifically designed for military families in transition, a project that merged their construction skills with their personal understanding of veterans' needs. His original military photo remained in his wallet, but now it represented something different. Not just memories of who he'd been, but a reminder of the strength that had carried him through both war and peace. The man in that photo would recognize him now, not because he'd returned to who he was, but because he'd built something new from the foundation of who he'd always been. Keanu attended these celebrations quietly, often standing at the back of the room with Sullivan, watching as James received accolades for his team's achievements. The actor's satisfaction came not from public recognition but from seeing how far a simple moment of connection had rippled outward, touching countless lives beyond that snowy Christmas Eve encounter. 2 years after that transformative Christmas Eve, snow once again dusted the palm trees along Sunset Boulevard. James stood at the entrance of the Veterans Recovery Project, watching as another group of veterans arrived for their first day of program orientation. The weather stirred memories of the night when a chance encounter changed not just his life, but sparked a movement that continued to grow beyond anyone's expectations. The recovery project had expanded to 3 additional locations across Los Angeles County, each facility implementing the proven model of veterans helping veterans rebuild their lives. James's construction teams had renovated and built each new center, ensuring they included features that addressed the unique needs of veterans in recovery. From security systems that reduced triggering situations to communal spaces that fostered brotherhood and healing. Keanu's quiet support had evolved into a sustainable foundation that funded veteran-led initiatives across the city. The actor never sought recognition for his role, understanding that the program's power lay in the veterans themselves taking ownership of their recovery. His friendship with James remained genuine and grounded, 2 men from different worlds united by their commitment to serving others. The doorway where their paths first crossed now bore a small plaque, marking the starting point of what locals called the Recovery Trail, a network of resources, businesses, and support services designed to help veterans transition from survival to success. James often brought new program participants there, using his story not to highlight his own journey, but to show them that rock bottom could become solid ground for rebuilding. That winter evening, as James prepared to lead an orientation session, he received a text from Keanu. The actor had found another veteran seeking help, asking if James could make time for a meeting. Without hesitation, James responded affirmatively, remembering how a similar message had once offered him a path forward when all other doors seemed closed. Inside his office, James looked at the wall of photos. Faces of veterans who'd found their way back, projects that provided homes for those still struggling, moments of victory both large and small. The worn photo of his unit in Afghanistan still held its place of honor, but now it represented something more than memories. It stood as testament to the warrior spirit that survived not just combat, but the harder battles fought on home soil. As snow continued falling outside, James gathered his materials for the orientation session. The room would soon fill with veterans carrying their own burdens of war and loss, each hoping to find what he had discovered that Christmas Eve, that sometimes the greatest acts of courage happen not on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when one warrior reaches out to another, proving that while the war may end, the brotherhood endures.